Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'll be addressing the question of why Western civilization is relevant for today society. Today, when we live in a multicultural society and a global society where we have an intersection of multiple cultures, religions, and ideas, there's a need to differentiate and provide a certain reference point from where ideas come from in order to understand the events that are going on today here in America and around the world. It's important for students, activists, academics, and even your common ordinary citizens to understand what is going on in the world today and Western civilization con- concepts provide an important insight into this. A couple of the articles I'll be looking at today for this week's reading highlight that, and I'll pull some salient ideas from them. The first one comes from Kwame Appiah, who argues that there's no such thing as Western civilization. He compares and contrasts Western civilization with the Muslim world, and also provides a framework from which, during the Cold War, it pointed out that the Western civilization was individualistic, democratic, liberty-minded, rational, and scientific. Yet critics would argue that there's a negative aspect to it in terms of looking at the slavery, the subjugation, racism, militarism, and genocide. So here we can see that the concept of Western civilization presents a framework in order to look at certain events. Now, when we look at it, this helped me specifically understand why 9/11 happened, to kind of understand the other side of the story of what was going on. In other words, how do I differentiate the Western world with the Muslim world in light of what happened during 9/11 and in the immediate aftermath of that? In terms of the Cold War, it helped us differentiate between the Christian West and the supposed um, the secular or communist East. So it provided a point of reference. Another article that kind of struck out to me was Lawrence Birkin's article, "What is Western Civilization?" And he pointed out that it's actually very difficult to define, that it can possibly be all-encompassing. So therefore, he argues that we should have a very limited definition of Western civilization, and then advocates a problems-based approach study method, which I could understand, because if you have too much or too big of a framework for Western civilization, all of a sudden you start throwing in concepts which may not apply, which may further confuse people who actually are trying to study what Western civilization is. And he actually points out that the Western notions of freedom arose in feudal society, which contrasts against what we're conditioned to think of coming from a Greco-Roman society. So that was an interesting point that I pulled out from there. And last article that stuck out to me was Bradley Berger's "What Exactly is the West?" And the concept that really gravitated towards me was his argument that Western civilization was the first to argue for the universal concept of the dignity of the human person. I think this is a very important concept in light of what's going on in the United States and even around the world today, especially with the social movements going on here in the United States, in DC, in other major metropolitan cities, but also what's going on in places such as China, where the Hong Kong democracy movement and also the movement in Burma with the Rohingya are referencing points of Western civilization, especially the positive aspects as related to democracy. So I think the study of Western civilization is absolutely important to understand what are some of the global and even some of the events going on in our country right now. So we need a point of reference, and it provides that point of reference. Ladies and gentlemen, please give me your feedback as to what you think of my argument, areas I can prove it, areas that I need to work on. Looking forward to your feedback. Thanks. God bless.